Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this new tutorial, I am going to show you how to add a simple shop system to this Vortex game. Recently we've added the ball and we can rotate it using the mouse. In this video, we will be able to select different balls from a shop menu, and I will add a second part in which we are going to use the gems to unlock new balls or characters. So before we get started, make sure to smash that subscribe button, that helps me a lot. And let's jump right in. So here we have a Vortex game project. Recently we've added this ball that we can rotate. In this video we'll be able to select different models. So you could download these models from the link under the description, like this emoji ball, the monkey, and so on. Basically we are going to drag these under this ball pivot. Then we are going to disable the other balls and enable the selected one. For example, if we press the monkey button, we are going to enable this ball or this character. And to do that, we have to add these under this ball pivot. So let's drag the emoji. As you can see, it's a little bit big. Let's change the size to 0.5 on the X, the Y, and the Z. And we have to move it a little bit down. So the ball Y position is minus 2.5. Let's put the same value. And now we can disable the previous ball and enable the emoji character. But if we play the game, you see that the ball is not colliding with the obstacles. And that's because we have added a few components under the previous ball, like the sphere collider component, the player collision script to check for collision, and so on. To fix that problem, we can use this object as the base and drag the emoji character under the ball that has all of the components that we need. And let's remove the mesh component using these dots, the remove component. Now if we hit play, you see that we can play with this new character and the player collision is working because we have all of the components that we need under this ball. I'm gonna change the name to ball holder that contains all of the ball models. The same thing, we can add the monkey and the soccer ball. Sometimes you have to change the scale a bit. For example, let's use 60 on the X, the Y, and the Z. Now it has the same size. And you could add as many balls as you want. Also, I want to add the default one, which is the normal ball. Using right click, 3D object, and let's choose a ball or sphere. And this is going to be the first one, which is the default character. Let's call it ball. First, I'm going to disable all of these so that we can adjust it. For example, I want to change the color. Under materials, we have this blue texture. Now that we have all of the balls that we need under this ball holder, we have to add a button so that we can go to the shop menu. So let's go under the canvas. And let's add the button under the start menu panel using right click, UI, then button. I'm gonna call it shop button. You could change the text to shop menu, or I will use the sprites. So let's delete the text. And I want to move the button to this position. Select the button. Then using Shift Alt, we can select this corner. And let's move it on the Y by 150. Also, I want to change it to a square by changing the width and the height to 75 by 75. Also, I want to add a little bit of spacing by changing the X position to minus 15. After that, we have to change the sprite. Under the sprites folder, GUI, I have different images like this one for the shop. The same thing, you will find all of the assets that you need, like the models and the sprites under the video description. Now before we use the sprite, we have to change its type. So by default, the type is set to default. We have to select it, then change it to Sprite 2D and UI, then hit apply. And once you do that, you will be able to change the shop button sprite by dragging this image. Now each time we press the button, we are going to enable a shop menu. We haven't created this yet. So let's go ahead and create a new panel under the canvas using right click, UI, then panel, and let's give it a name like shop menu panel. From the inspector, I want to change the opacity to 255, which is the maximum. And let's leave the color as white. Also, I need another button so that we can go back to the start menu using right click UI, then a button with the Text Mesh Pro. The same thing, I don't want the text. I will get rid of it, but I will change the button size to 70 by 70 and move it to this corner. The same thing, you have to select this square, and by using Shift Alt, select this option. The same thing, I want to add a little bit of spacing on the X and the Y. Finally, I want to change the sprite like this one. But first you have to select it and change the type to Sprite 2D and UI, then hit apply. Let's select the button again and choose the back sprite. And let's give this button a name like back button. By default, we are going to disable the shop menu. We only need the start menu. And each time we press the shop button, which is this one, we need to disable the start menu panel and enable the shop menu panel. So to do that, it's very simple. Select the button. Then under this on-click list, we can add some functions that are called each time we press the button. Let's press this plus icon twice. Then we can drag in the object that we want to disable or enable. For example, the start menu panel. Once we click on the shop button, we have to disable it. And to do that, we can select the function from this new function, game object, and we have set active. If you uncheck that, it will disable the start menu panel. And at the same time, we have to enable the shop menu panel. You have to drag in the game object, shop menu panel, then select game object set active through this time by checking this checkbox. And let's give it a try. When I click on the shop button, you see that the game is started. And that's because we are checking if we tap on the screen or press it, we start the game. To fix this problem, we need to check if we are pressing a UI element like a button. In such case, we have to return and never start the game. Under the scripts folder, player, let's open up the player manager. And under the update function, we have these lines of code to check if we tap on the screen. In such case, we start the level by changing level started to true. Before we do that, we have to check if it's a UI element, then we have to return. And that's very easy. We can use a namespace using Unity Engine dot event system or event systems. Then to check if we are pressing a button, we can use if event system dot current dot, and we have this function is pointer over game object. Basically, it returns true if we press UI element. So is pointer over game object means UI object. In such case, we have to return, and that fixes the problem. And there you go, we can go to the shop menu, but we haven't added the functions to return. Select the back button, and under on click list, the same thing, let's click on this plus icon twice. So each time we press the back button, we're going to disable the shop menu using game object set active false, and re-enable the start menu using game object set active true this time. And yeah, it's working. We can go to the shop menu and go back. Now let's add the buttons that we're gonna click to select different balls. Enable the shop menu again so that we can adjust it. First, I will add another panel that contains the buttons using right click, UI, then panel, and let's call it balls panel. We can select a different color to make it better, like a black color. And we can add a little bit of spacing by changing the left value to 80, the right to 80 as well. And from the top, let's use 120 and 150 from the bottom. And here's we have our balls panel. Now we are going to create the buttons using right click under the balls panel, UI, and let's use a button again. The same thing, I will get rid of the text. Now you could add all of the buttons and replace them under this panel, but that's going to be a little bit difficult. Luckily, we have another way. We can add a component to this balls panel that will organize all of the buttons. Select the balls panel, and from the inspector, let's add a component and search for grid, and it is this component, grid layout group. If I duplicate this button a few times using Ctrl D, you see that we have these in order. We could also change some settings by selecting the balls panel, and from this grid layout group component, we can change the cell size like 150 on the X and the Y, or let's try with 130. We can add spacing. So try to play around with these settings. I want to change the child alignment to the upper center, but at this point we don't know what this button selects, so we have to change the sprite. The same thing, I've added some images under sprites balls, like the default ball, the monkey, emoji, and so on. So we have selected these four. The first one is the default ball. Select the first button and drag in the default sprite. The same thing for the second one. So let's put these in order. We have the emoji character, then the monkey, and finally the soccer ball. Of course, you could add as many balls as you want, so I will stick with these four. Now, each time we click on the first button, we need to select the first one, which is the default ball. If we press the last button, which is the soccer ball, we have to disable all of these and enable the soccer. And to do that, let's create a script that is responsible for the ball selection. Under the scripts folder, player, let's right click, create, C# script. I'm gonna call it ball selector. Then let's open a tab in Visual Studio. So first of all, we need to add a reference to these models so that we can enable and disable them according to the selected ball. And to do that, we can create a list of game objects using public game object. And to declare this as a list, we add these square brackets. Then we can give it a name like ball skins. Now let's save our script. And we have to attach it to an object in our game. For example, let's use the ball pivot or the ball holder. You simply need to drag in the ball selector. And there you go, we can select the size. So we have 4 balls. Then we can reference them. First we have the default ball, the emoji, and so on. Now let's go back to the C# script. Also, we want another variable that stores the selected ball index using int. So if you don't add public, the variable is going to be private. So we don't want to modify this. Then let's call it selected ball. Let's set it to 0 by default. Then under the start function, we are going to disable all of the balls under this array. Then enable the selected one. And to do that, we can use a for each loop. So for each game object, we can call it scan. In the ball scans array, then we can disable all of them using scan. And let's use dot set active and pass in false to disable the object. After that, we are going to enable the object at the index selected ball using the ball scans array. And in these square brackets, we put the index selected ball dot set active true this time. So I will disable the shop menu by default. So if you disable all of these, the script will enable the first one. And there you go, we have the first ball that is selected. Now each time we go to the shop menu and select one of the buttons, we have to disable the current selected ball and enable this one if we press this button. And to do that, we can create a function that changes the current selected ball to the new one, and we can use it for the buttons. So I will get rid of the update function, we don't need it for now. And let's add public void. I'm gonna call this function change ball, and we have to pass in the index. So if we pass in the value 1, we are going to select the emoji. Number 3 is the soccer ball. So we start from 0, which is the default ball. Anyways, we have to pass in this variable as an integer. And let's call it index. Under this function, we can disable the current selected ball using ball scans. At the index selected ball dot set active false, and change the selected ball to the new index using selected ball equals the index variable or parameter that we pass in. And finally, we enable the new scan again using ball scans at the index selected ball dot set active true. Now we are going to call this function from the buttons. So let's go back, but let's select the first one. You could select the plus icon for each button, but I think I'm gonna select all of these. Select the first one, then shift select the last one, and let's hit the icon. Then we have to call the function, which is under the script ball selector, and it is attached to the ball holder. So let's drag it. Then under no function, you see that we can select the script ball selector, and here's our function change ball, but we have to change the index. So whenever we press the first button, we're going to change the ball to the first one that has the index 0. The second has the index 1, make sure to change it, and so on. And I think that's pretty much it. Let's disable the shop menu panel by default. Now we can go to the shop menu, and if I click on the monkey, you see that it's enabled under the hierarchy. So let's get back and check. Yeah, we have the monkey character. The same thing, we can select the soccer ball, and yeah, it's working. As you can see, we can't start the game, and that's because we have this start menu panel. So if I change the opacity to another number, you see that we have a panel, and this is a UI element. At the beginning of the video, we are checking if we are pressing a UI element, including the panel, we return. To fix this problem, we need to tell Unity that this panel is not a UI element. Basically, you can select the start menu panel and uncheck Raycast target. So let's change the opacity to 0 again and hit play. And yeah, now we can start the game. Also, we can select different balls like the soccer ball. I think that's pretty much it, guys, for this video. I hope you like it. If you have any question or comment, make sure to write it under the comment section down below. And I will see you in the next one.